I said it before and I'll say it again. Life moves pretty fast. You don't stop and look around once in a while, you could miss it.
Welcome to Production Report, the podcast about telling the stories behind some of our favorite movies. I'm your host, George, here to dig around and take you truly behind the scenes. While the comic book film is a staple of the Hollywood machine now, in 1988, it was not really the case. Hollywood bombs like Superman 4 and Howard the Duck left studios without a return on investment and would become cultural touchstones not because of their quality, but because of just how much audiences hated and laughed at them. At about the same time, a new cartoon and an accompanying toy line created by Playmates launched. These new products were not based on a new idea, they were based off the comic books of one Kevin Eastman and Peter Laird. They were the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. And while not many expected much out of these, they would soon become a cultural phenomenon. And while you might have think that one came before the other, all of these elements, toys, the cartoon, and what would be the eventual movie, all happened at about the same time. This is the story of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie. Gary Proper was a surfer dude. He was also a producer. It is here where the story begins. And while it is true that Gary Proper did love surfing, he was also known for the Showtime comedy show called Gallagher, which you may or may not have known. It was a prop comedy-based show. But him and his producer Kim Dawson, who also worked on the show, suddenly became infatuated with the idea of making a movie out of this bizarre comic book called Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. And they thought they would find success. Well, it took some convincing. Dawson and Proper eventually got the blessing of Eastman and Laird. Gary's pitch for this idea sounded insane at the time. The toy line and the cartoon were both in its early stages, and there was not a guaranteed hit. One of the many he told this grand idea to was Thomas Gray. And like many, Thomas Gray thought they were absolutely out of their minds. Thomas was a well-known producer at the production company Golden Harvest, who are best known for their martial arts films, such as Bruce Lee's Enter the Dragon. But after many phone calls and a lot of asking, Thomas finally broke. But it sure did take a while. Thomas needed a blessing from the president of Golden Harvest, Raymond Chow, and with this idea of making a $2.5 to $3 million movie very quickly in Hong Kong, it sounded like a slam dunk. But of course, as it often is with movies, it was a little bit more complicated than that in the end. But right now, everything's still easy. In a director, they find Steve Barron, who at the time only really directed music videos, but there's music videos for Michael Jackson, specifically Billie Jean and a-ha's Take On Me, iconic music videos. Steve then found his own writer. That writer was Todd Langdon. Steve and Todd were really excited about this project. So much so that they recall the story. They said that they locked themselves up in a hotel room for 2 months and just started writing and scripting ideas and pulling out pages of the comic book. A stream of Ninja Turtle consciousness. Now complete with the script, they were ready to start the movie. And for this specific project, a project that transformed these comic book and cartoon characters into the real world, it was going to take costumes that were way out of the budget of $3 million, and the creativity of one of the world's best puppeteers. To the dismay of Thomas, this was going to be more than a $3 million movie. That creative mind that would save them would be none other than Jim Henson, creator of The Muppets. And really, it's crazy that they got Jim Henson, because Jim Henson, for Golden Harvest and for this production that was around $3 million, he was sort of out of their league. A lot of out of their league. But fortunately, Steve Barron and Jim Henson were friends. So now with Jim Henson on board, suddenly this production becomes a little more expensive, but still relatively cheap considering you're working with Jim Henson. In reality, they were looking at a $9 million production. But for Golden Harvest, that uptick in a budget is a serious deal. And Thomas, again, our producer, starts really worrying, because he, again, was taking a gamble on this. Playmates keeps telling them that they feel like these toys are going to be very big this holiday, but all he has is promises and this gut feeling that he has something here. But Thomas did not want to go back to the Golden Harvest and Raymond Chow and tell him that they needed to up the budget. And they also really didn't have a distributor. But thankfully, both of those things seemed solved for at least a bit. as Fox became the movie's producer, and with that Fox name, they were able to get more money and sign the deal with Jim Henson. But this would not last long, as there are switches in power in the upper echelons of Fox. Suddenly, the new people in charge don't understand why they are funding Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and why they are even bothering with it, and they duck out of the deal. But when Fox does pull out, they thankfully find a new partner in New Line Cinema, who agrees to distribute the film and fund partial development. With funding in place, and Golden Harvest finally betting everything on Ninja Turtles, production could finally start. But the challenges were not over just yet. Perhaps one of the most unique things about the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie isn't that it's a licensed live-action movie based on a cartoon or a comic book, but it's the fact that they're using the Ninja Turtles costumes in the movies. As a Ninja Turtles fan, I would personally say that the Ninja Turtles have never looked as good as they did in those first two Ninja Turtles movies. And it's clear that wouldn't have been possible without the help of Jim and Brian Henson, Jim Henson's brother and puppeteer. The story of the actual production of the Ninja Turtles movie isn't a grand story of drama on set, but it was just the challenge that these costumes presented. Each turtle had two costumes. A costume that they would use for dialogue scenes, they were more intricate, they were the puppets, and then a suit that they would use for when they had to do action scenes. That main costume, where you had to act and give a performance, weighed about 70 pounds, and they were very difficult to get out of. While you could remove the head, you could never fully remove it because of the wires attached to it. All of the gears and servos of the costume were in the shell of each turtle costume. And because of this, it was very hard to get out of the suits. Which I guess only makes sense because it serves like a backpack or a trunk. Considering the conditions of acting inside these suits, being a Ninja Turtle was not easy. One of the performers in the film developed claustrophobia because of the experience. Many of times the performers took off their heads screaming because they felt like they couldn't breathe and they were sweating. Because again, these actors were acting and performing martial arts in these giant green mechanical suits. But even so, these suits were still a technological feat. Brian Henson said that he usually expects to develop 1 or 2 new technologies on a movie. For Ninja Turtles, he developed 5. The faces of the actual Ninja Turtles were controlled remotely. This controller would control their mouths, their eyes, and their facial movements that really brought these characters to life. But at the same time, this was completely new technology, and it was technology made under a very strict budget. Because of this, technical difficulties were very common on set, so much so that they were given a fun nickname, MTB, Major Turtle Breakdown. When MTB did take place, the actors not in a suit were usually performing without a turtle, so it would be a shot with the character talking to someone off screen. It's only noticeable once you're looking for it. Another challenge presented because of these suits was that, well, you couldn't really move that fast. And this is a martial arts movie. So because of that, the movie was actually shot at a lower frame rate and then sped up for certain scenes to make things look more realistic. This was actually already a very common technique in a lot of kung fu movies, but for Ninja Turtles, it became almost essential to make it look actually believable and something that audiences could buy into. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles was also a very dark movie. Remember that this movie wasn't really based on the cartoons as much as it was based on those comic books that Steve Barron fell in love with. And because of that, you can really see there's smoking in the movie. A major plot line of it is teens who commits crimes for the Shredder. And it's also a movie with very dark tones. I would say it's a lot more Taxi Driver than Labyrinth. The colors of the movie are a lot darker. The streets of New York look dangerous. And that's also present in the lighting, which was both a creative decision but also a decision made out of necessity. A problem presented by the suits were that if you got the lighting just right, you could see through the eye holes of the costumes, or even whenever a turtle would open their mouth, you could see the actor inside of it. There's actually a scene in the final print of the movie where you can see the actor inside the suit when he opens his mouth, but because of the lighting, you can't really tell. You have to turn up the brightness or mess with the actual footage. Whether it be purposeful or due to technical limitations, gave the Ninja Turtles movie a certain look that makes it really stand out. It was a movie that both children and adults could like. But even given all of the technical problems with the film, in the end they made a movie, and they were not sure how it would be received. Because again, It was a darker movie. It was a movie based on Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, on a comic book that wasn't very popular, but a cartoon series that was starting to pick up steam. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles launches on March 1990, and while they were worried at first, their fears quickly vanished. The Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie went on to become the highest-grossing independent film of all time, the 9th highest-grossing film worldwide in 1990, and the most successful film in the franchise, until the 2014 reboot. Suddenly, everyone who turned down this movie was calling them back, congratulating them, and hoping to get the rights for the sequels. But Thomas Gray was loyal, and stood with Golden Harvest and New Line Cinema. Today, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie is seen as a cultural relic, and because of its tone, it's a movie that has aged well with its audience. It's not fantastic by any means, but it's at least trying to be something, and it's my personal favorite Ninja Turtles movie, and a movie I hold very close to my heart. This episode of Production Report was made possible by the information in the film Turtle Power, the definitive history of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Untold Story of the Movie Every Studio in Hollywood Rejected, by Aaron Couch for The Hollywood Reporter. That's all the time we have today on Production Report. Until next time, keep watching movies and stay curious.